Sabbe Satta Bhavantu Sukhitatta. If you have listened to the video, the trailer that we were circulating, I mentioned this, and I suppose there are Sinhalese or Sri Lankan Buddhist Buddhist in this forum, as well as who are non-Buddhist, non-Sri Lankan. So I will try to give a bit of background uh, with regard to the excuse me, with regard to the culture of a Buddhist monk, as well as a bit of cross-referencing that would be need for a non-Buddhist, non-Sri Lankan person, or for that matter, a non-Indian person, because some of the things that we discussed in this part of the world might not be the case in that part of the world. So then, when I cross-reference, we might need to have some understanding of what I'm talking about. So to start with, we are talking about the impact of lockdown, impact of lockdown, and how it affects your life. And I hope that you can see my screen as well. I have a few slides on that, and at the same time, I'm talking from a different device. So due to technical reasons, um, to look at my face can look through one, and the others who wants to look at the presentation can look through the other input. And right, so let's start this the lockdown from a monk's view discussion series. And discussion series will be a 4-day discussion. So I'll be discussing certain things on the first day and the second day, and I'll explain how we do it. So to begin with, the lockdown. Um, we say lockdown. There's many angles to look at or view the impact of Corona. There's medical, financial, geopolitical, very importantly, and quite a bit of social and even education. I see that quite good things are happening because of Corona, especially due to education. Even yesterday, I was with some people, the teachers actually, and they were saying how fantastic. I mean, not in the sense the Corona, but how the entire gamut of things have changed for the teachers. They're using Zoom, they're using WhatsApp, Microsoft Teams, and they're going into more learning management system, LMS, even at the secondary or primary school level. So a lot of content are now available for free, which is a nice thing. So many good aspects are also there with Corona for education. I think financially it would be a bit of a downturn, but many good things also that we can see coming out of Corona. But more importantly, what pertaining to our discussion, it would be more how this affects in a personal level. And when we look at how it affects on a personal level, uh, I have roughly gathered a few ideas which are out there. But mind you, these are not the only issues that we face. So some of the main issues would be, especially in the lockdown. Before we go there, I think this is not the first lockdown that we are facing. It's been the second or the third. So we have some experience about lockdown. It's not our first. Um, so it's a bit of an advanced version of a lockdown now. There are more complicated issue compared to the first time, because first time it was novel for us, and the lockdown was new. So the way we reacted at that time is quite different to the way we are reacting now. Now that things have complicated a little. So out of many issues that most of us face, uh, or at least most of my friends or people who are around the world complain me about their issues, they would be boredom, freedom taken away, building stress within the family or with your loved one, um, uncertainty, fear of sickness and death, fear of losing income, issues in transition to the new normal. Like I said, the new education system, new work system, working from home, etc. So these are the issues that we have faced. And in order to explain the monk's point of view, I have divided these issues into three. I'll tell you eventually why I divided these issues into three. So how this, as per this discussion series, how it would flow is that I will be explaining on the day one about the first part, which I attach to compulsion. Don't worry about what compulsion is. Um, So we'll be discussing about that part on the first, on the day one, and then we'll be discussing about the part two, the fear, on the day two, and then non-acceptance on the third day, and on the fourth day we'll be looking at a more holistic picture, and I will also allow more Q and A time on the fourth day. Again, as per the structure of this discussion, it will be run for 1 hour, and then there will be a half an hour Q&A session. So on the first day, I will just lay out my story. So I might take a little more time than usual. And I also would like to have an engaging conversation with regard to Corona or for any discussion. But unfortunately, I think it's better that on the first 2 days, first couple of days, I give you a bit of I cover a bit of ground of what I'm trying to say, and then we'll come back to Q&A and touch base on the initial points that we have covered. Right. So that could be the structure of this discussion, and also throughout the discussion, throughout the series, we will also have a sort of a method of execution. That would be, I'll be dividing this entire conversation into three parts. And the first part, not the first part, but one part would be a therapeutic practice. Now, I will explain to you what a therapeutic practice. You will see what a therapeutic practice is in the long run, but there will be a component for therapeutic practice, and then a therapeutic narrative. Narrative. So, apart from these two, bulk of this discussion, I hope, should be towards self-awareness, right? So, um, I also attached some of our behavioral ways into this execution of the conversation. In Sinhala or even in Sanskrit or Pali, there's a differentiation called Sita Kaya Vachane. Now, what that means is Kaya means your body, and Vachana means your word, and Sita means your mind. Uh, so, body again is is quite an important ground that we are going to cover in this discussion. Why? Because you would see that mind and body is always in a harmony, and the moment it lose sync, there will be a problem. And also, often that you would see that body has an impact on the way we think, and the mind has an impact on the way body functions. So it's very important that we concentrate on this one with regard to the whole corona-related, COVID-related stress that we have, lockdown-related stress we have. Um, uh, to give you an example how this body and mind combination work, I'm sure that most of you are aware of how it works. But you will see that I'll give you a small story. Um, our neighbors, we have some neighbors next to our temple in Sri Lanka, and one day uh, the husband was at our temple, and he was explaining that one day he has discovered a cat who has fallen to their well. In Sri Lanka, we have wells where we take water apart from uh, the water lines which are on the street. So a cat has fallen into the well, and the cat has died, and cat has decayed. So when they discovered, it was almost 10-15 days after that the cat has decayed, and it was just a skeleton. So they have been drinking the water of that cat well for a few days. Everything is okay. The water is fantastic. Maybe tasted a little funny, but it was good. But on the 10th day, when they discovered that the cat is there, everyone fell sick. So then he was telling me that if we didn't open the well, if we went unnoticed, we wouldn't get sick. But because we opened the well and everyone saw that everyone was so pukey, and they had stomachache, and they were not pretending; it was for real. And oftentimes that there's something I ask my friends whenever I meet some friend from a different culture. I ask this thing: what's your reaction to coffee? Right. So, for example, I was in Europe for some time, and uh, in countries like Germany, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing of the day is that you drink this very powerful shot of coffee with chocolate. And it's very powerful. And that's when you start your daily routine, and your bowel movements also start with that. So when you want to, go to the toilet, you would drink a cup of coffee. That's how you go. But opposite to that, in Sri Lanka, coffee is considered um, sort of an anti-diarrhea medication. So if someone is having diarrhea, the recommendation is drink coffee. So in Sri Lanka, when you drink coffee, it stops. But in some of the other countries, it helps. So I always had this confusion: what is coffee really? So at one point, I was thinking maybe it's a genetical difference between Sri Lankans and other people who are in European countries, or say Asians and Caucasians. But then to figure out that some of my friends who are Sri Lankans by birth, by biology, but who have been living in those countries, they also responded to the same way that the Caucasians respond. So I thought it's probably not genetic, but it's probably related to the way we think. So our body and mind work in quite a bit of harmony. And I figured out that we practice this art called Qigong in Thailand. And in Qigong is a is a Chinese form of, it's a way of living actually. You could say the martial art component came out of it. There was a medical component came out of Qigong. So it's a 4,000-year-old practice of body and mind and spirit. So in that, in medical Qigong especially, they have this thing called yin organs and yang organs. So every organ inside our body is connected in a way, uh, but it's at the same time it's not the same. So one part is called yin and the other part is called yang. So if you take in our body, the connected organs are our mind and stomach, or the uh, digestive system, or at least the upper part of the digestive system, and the eyes and the liver, kidneys and the skin. So one of my friends, who's a gastrointestinal specialist, he was saying that most of the time the cases that he gets with regard to irritable bowel or reflux, heartburn, reflux, and all those type of gastrointestinal issues, they actually don't have a gastrointestinal physical issue per se, but they have a depression related or a stress related issue. So then I was quite fascinated by that, by his comment that our body and mind is more connected than what we think. So having said that, I also forgot to self-introduce myself before going into this, because I said I need to give you some context as to what a Buddhist monk is. So I myself became a Buddhist monk about 3 years ago, and before that, I used to live a different life. I was an engineer. And I was a businessman, entrepreneur, also a lecturer. So I played many roles across the board: a father, sometimes, husband, boyfriend, etc., etc. So while I was playing these roles, I had an observation, and then when I became a monk, I had an observation. So the whole point of this discussion is to sort of give
Another
you my.
review. When you're talking, if it is not required the presentation, you can stop the sharing screen. Then we can see your face proper.
Okay, okay, I will do. Okay, right. Thank you, Ananda Thero. So, um, okay. So thanks for reminding. So, as I was saying, a bit of context to the Buddhist monk lifestyle. Um, so Buddhist monks, I would, since there are some people who are not from the subcontinent of India, I would introduce the difference of a monk here. So generally, in any culture, there's clergy, there are priests, and about 4,000 years ago, again in India, there has been a little change of clergy or priests to a different segment. Priests are usually in India. The society was somewhat feudal feudalistic. They had a caste system where people from each caste could perform a particular role. So, for example, the Brahmins would be the priests. They would be involved with the the priest activities, but clergies too. They would even involve with the kings, helping them how to um, run the country, give them advice, etc., etc. And then there would be another caste or another sect of the society who would be running the country, who would be the generals of the army, etc. And then there will be another sector who will be running the businesses, and then uh, farmers, and all these types of people that who produce the hunters, etc. And then there was another sector which was sort of suppressed, that they were doing the uh, sort of blue collar jobs. There was a big gap between the white collar and the blue collar back in the day. So anyway, this priest existed, and then there came a new group who didn't want to be included in the mainstream priest, and also did not come from the same uh, society, or from the same family background, but they were more interested in enlightenment, or in Indian terms, moksha, or in Sanskrit terms, moksha. Moksha means enlightenment. So it could mean anything, finding Brahman, being one with Brahman, to finding enlightenment and moksha. So this sect was a little different, and that sect was called Upanishad that time. And this Upanishad evolved for 1,000 years, and then Buddhism came. Siddhartha Gautama, who was a prince, became Buddha, and Buddha had many followers, starting from uh, 5 followers in the beginning. It expanded a lot, and then when it expanded, this sect also was Upanishads at the first, by definition, but they also got absorbed as the mainstream priest. So if you take Sri Lanka, Buddhist monks would represent the priest community here. So I wanted to give you this context because sometimes it's been nice to cross-reference or relate to what I'm trying to say. So then this was the this is the Buddhist way here, and then there are certain things that in West it would be considered very odd. For example, the way a Buddhist monk finds his daily food. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens not in also not in all the temples, but in some temples. There's this thing called bhiksha, where we have a bowl, and in the morning, like at 6:30, we go out right after the sunrise. We go out with the bowl, and then there are people who are willing to donate food. It's called alms. And in West, I have spoken to many of my friends. In West, it would be considered as begging, which doesn't have a nice sort of a connotation to it. Begging is not a nice thing, because if you can work for yourself, you should work. But in this part of the world, or the Indian subcontinent, it's actually quite different. Uh, the society, as a society, acknowledges this sect of Upanishad, or people who have dedicated their lives into a spiritual path, and it's considered a nice thing to support them. So it's not actually seen as a begging, but a good thing that they do. So a lot of people are willing to do that. So I wanted to tell you that fact, that compared to priest priest per se, in mainstream priest world, these sannyasis or Upanishads or monks, they get their requirements from people. People donate it to them. And again, what I wanted to harp on is that priests have a separate way of getting their needs, like donations. But monks, it's a donation, but it's a different type of a donation. It's through bhiksha. And again, bhiksha, uh, it looks like begging, but it is considered differently to begging, which is not a notion in the Western world, right? So I would quickly go back to this presentation. Okay, so I was telling that there's mind, body and the world. Yes, second. It's a bit of a hassle to go back and forth between these two. By next week, I'll fix this issue. Okay, right. So what I meant by these three parts in this discussion is that firstly, do certain things. During this discussion, I will focus on certain things which should help our body. And a good body, a relaxed body, unstressed body helps the unstressed mind, right? You might have seen if you're really hungry, you can't concentrate on a discussion simply because you are hungry, your body is stressed. So you need to quench that thirst. You need to, settle down that before we get into a meaningful discussion. And then a therapeutic narrative, words, actually, it does not mean the words in a normal sense. I'm not talking about the words we utter. It's actually about the words that we have inside our mind, the right? And you will understand the purpose of me giving you certain therapeutic narratives. A therapeutic narrative would help you to feel better, come out of your stress. For example, if you have some issue, which is a pressing issue, and if you somehow happen to know that it's something that you have done in a previous lifetime, and there's no way that you can get out of it. You just have to suffer the consequences because you did it. It's your karma. So then all you can do is be okay with it. I mean, you have to settle down with that. I did it. I have to get it. So might as well face it. Or so that's one therapeutic narrative. An example for a therapeutic narrative would be also that I'm facing with something, and it's the wish of my God Almighty. I have no hand in it. I can't do anything about it. I have to face the consequences. So all I can do is just bow down and accept it. Another way of therapeutic narrative is that you could also think, see, I have a issue, but this issue, although it's an issue for me, there are certain reasons that why this issue is like this. Uh, Newton came up with this law of gravity, and because of that, everything falls down. There's gravity. I can't do anything about it. I'm helpless. All I can do is accept and move on. So, therapeutic narrative is somewhat of that nature. It's a narrative for our mind. It's words for our mind, not really for words to utter or to speak, but a narrative that we can make use in a therapeutic manner to ease ourselves, to get out of our stress. But more importantly, I want you to focus on this other part, the self-awareness part, which is not a therapeutic part, but which is a self-awareness part. And suppose that you are sick and I'm a doctor, my pills would be the therapeutic practice and the therapeutic narrative. But by self-awareness, I'm actually teaching you medicine. I'm not giving you a tablet. I'm giving you a self-healing knowledge. So that will be the self-awareness part. So having said that, we will today focus on the first issues that we have, which is the boredom, uh, freedom taken away, and building stress with the family members. So if I can first give you away an idea, I would say that all these things. Why I said that is that I will not be asking you a question. I will be just throwing out my idea, my narrative, and then later on we can discuss if you agree or if you don't agree. So most of the time, for many of these issues, urge is the culprit. We have a desire, an urge, and we can't control this urge. This compulsive, desirous urge doesn't let us be in peace, right? And what do we do about that? And when it comes to this urge, it also depends. From our age, it depends, right? When we are young, we have a certain urge, we have a desire, and at that time, when we are quite young, we are quite boundless, and our urges are easily fulfilled. But then when we become teenagers, when we grow a little young, when we become when we become adults, we have our urges, but we do not have the money to fulfill them. We have the time, we have the energy, but we don't have the money to fulfill them. And then we start working, we start earning. Now we have the money, but we don't have the time to fulfill them. And at a later point, we have the money, we have the time, but we don't have the energy to fulfill them. So these urges are there, but the problem is that sometimes we can't fulfill our urges. And again, to say what an urge is, that urge is something that it's like when your bladder is full, and then you have to go, and it's quite irritating, right? So it's a uh, it- that's an example for an urge. So when you really want it, but you can't have it, you yearn for it. So that's not the urge, but that's the effect of urge, right? When we want to have something, and when it's out there and we can just grab it, then the urge is not a problem. But urge becomes a problem. Um, it becomes a more apparent or a visible problem. Even before it is somewhat of a problem, but we won't notice it. But it becomes a problem. It becomes a tension when we can't have it, right? So when we can't have it, urge becomes a problem. Uh, so why I took this, why I when Anuruddha Thero suggested, why I said let's do this, is that monks, when they become monks, monks have urges too. But by the system, they are bound by certain things that they can't really do everything that they would like to do. So their urges are somewhat blocked. They have urges, but they can't do it. And when you become a monk, you can just wear a different robe, or wear a different piece of garment, and call yourself a monk, or you can become a monk internally. So when you say monk, I would refer to becoming a monk internally, not only through your uh, clothes, but more of an internal transformation. And like I said, when I became a monk, the first few days I used to spend in a monastery. Uh, so in this monastery, we had to do this bhiksha. So early in the morning at 6:30, we would go out, and we would go out in this bhiksha with the bowl. Um, and the area that I lived was not the best. How to say, it wasn't a very. It was a dry zone. It was a dry zone, and right next to our temple, to our uh, cave, there are elephants, wild elephants. So that's sort of dangerous if you meet face to face. That's sort of dangerous. And the villages down. We have to climb down the mountain, climb down the rock for about 2 kilometers, 1.5 kilometers. And when we go down, we find the uh, fence, electric fence, to keep away the elephants from coming inside the village. So when we walk towards the village, when you do the big stuff, next time I will show you my bowl where we what we do the big stuff. So when we go out as a Buddhist monk, you're not supposed to talk. So you don't go to a house and knock the door and say, "I need food." You don't say that. What you do is you just go in front of the house, and then you stay there silently, not peeping at the house, not looking out, looking also. You just stay there peacefully, and then if they see you, they would come and give you the food, donate you the food. So I have seen that because by default we can do Diksha only once a day, once every day, because climbing up and down that cave was the rock was difficult. So you don't want to climb down 2 times a day. So we would do the Diksha in the morning, and then we would consume the same food during the lunchtime, and then we would not be eating towards the rest of the day. So in a way, a Buddhist monk is on an intermittent fasting diet. So we eat in a period of 8 hours. So it's a 8 to 16 intermittent fasting. So so during the night, you're somewhat hungry, especially me being a layperson who used to eat 3 meals and then becoming a monk. I was quite hungry. So in the morning, you wake up thinking that I'm really hungry, and then I need to go down and grab this food. But when you go down, when you walk down 1.5 kilometers in this hilly stretch and come down to the village, passing the fence, the electric fence. Um, and when you go in front of a house, I could see that people are inside the house. They are moving about. The television is on, but they don't see me. And if they don't see me, I have to simply go. Right? I have to move on to the next house, and then I would stay there and see if anyone notices me. And by any chance, if someone notices me, they come out and they donate a spoon of what they have prepared. So another good thing is that by doing that, you're not a burden to the society because anyone can donate you a spoon of their rice pot. Instead of giving you an entire rice pot, anyone can give you a spoon. So in a way, that it's a very organic way that no one is to pressurize to donate to you. It's a very small thing that you have to donate. So in some houses, they spot me, but they don't have food because they're so poor. They come and say, sadhu, which is the term for a monk. Sadhu, we don't have food for even ourselves. I'm really sorry. Um, I really wanted to give you, but I don't have food. And that area was quite poverty stricken, and they are all living in farms. They are all farmers, and because of the dry season, they don't have water throughout the year. So it's a bit of a rough situation, and there's elephants and all sort of other things. So their household income is quite low, and then me coming down from the rock all the way down and go to a house, and they say, Sadhu, I'm really sorry, we didn't cook food today. So and then you have to move on to the next house. And I really felt the urge at that time. You might not understand this, me being a layperson, eating 3 meals, going to a temple, and staying on a fasting for the most of the night, waking up in the morning, climbing down the 1.5 kilometer rocky patch, and then go to a house and they say, Sadhu, we don't have food. Or even they would not notice me, right? So then, even if some people notice, what they do is they donate whatever they. So when you go to the next house, they donate what they have. So end of the day, that whole ball becomes a soup of everything. And that bowl is not only for food items. Some people donate non-edibles also. So you would find in that bowl the curries, the rice, bananas with the peel, mangoes without peeling the mangoes, um, biscuit packet, soap, yogurt. You would find almost anything. It doesn't have to be edible. There are non-edibles also. So uh, the bowl looks quite different. I would say even a little disgusting. But then, what I wanted to point out was that when my mother knew that I was doing this Diksha, becoming a monk, she was quite upset. And the word she said was, Sadhu, are you okay? Because it looked quite disgusting. And I would like to tell you that I was in a sort of a transformative period. And when I really decided to become a monk, when I sort of took that decision, all right, I'm going to do that. I was actually was not in Sri Lanka. I was in Singapore. Every year in October, there's this exhibition called ITB, and I get invited as a buyer. It's a hosted program, so I get to stay 3-4 days in Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. So it's quite a posh hotel, and if you don't know Marina Bay Sands, that was the hotel which was featured in Crazy Rich Asians. So it's quite I think 5 or 7 starish. And when I was eating breakfast in that 7-star hotel or 5-star hotel, I figured that eating this versus eating from that bowl doesn't feel any different to me. So I was down with it. I was cool with it. It was okay for me. So that's why I was telling that being a monk is not just wearing a robe. There will be a different level of acceptance. So because of that, because I really transformed myself to accept that food even out of that bowl, it was okay for me. So um, so I wanted to point you out that with regard to the monk's behavior. So going back to our presentation, And a monk, then again, in terms of his daily routine, monks don't have many things to do. They only have a few things to do. They can meditate, they can do the prayers, the chanting, and they have to keep their quarters clean, wash your robes, clean the place, clean the temple, and then go on this diksha. So it's pretty much 5 or 6 activities, right? And again, when you are deprived of electricity or internet or a phone, you don't have any other source of entertainment other than a book. But then the books are all about philosophy, so there's really no entertainment in that sense. But then I figured that after right now I'm not living in the same temple, same monastery. I'm living in a temple in the city in Colombo. But looking back, I figured that that period was so beautiful. I mean, I didn't feel any issue at all. Even now, one of my friend asked me uh, right after the first wave of lockdown, Sadhu, how are you? Is everything okay? We are in a lockdown. Uh, is everything okay with you? Are you getting food? Are you getting your rations? What can we do for you? Is everything okay? Then my response was actually quite epiphany for me also. I said, absolutely nothing has changed for me. And I think it was quite fantastic. Although people felt that there was a huge difference after this lockdown and the whole COVID thing came, to me personally, I did not feel much different. You know, it was the same old thing, because my life was so minimalistic. I was so content with what I had. Life did not feel the issues related to COVID, related to Corona or to lockdown, did not make an impact on my life at all. Apart from more people now having time and calling me with regard to their depressions, other than that, I had no impact from the lockdown. So I wanted to point out that uh, that would be the learning that you can get out from me, about from my experience with regard to your issues. And I'll be sharing my experience, how a monk could think in this particular situation. But actually, you know, although I'm a monk, we are quite similar. I mean, I'm human, you are human. We share the same DNA to 99.999%. The DNAs, the structure we have, the chromosomes, they are quite the same. And even I speak English, right? So we are quite similar. And I also have been living in the Western culture, so I understand the ways of Western world and the Eastern world. So understanding me, or me relating to my experience, is actually not for me, it's for you to relate this experience to your life. So by trying to understand the monk, you are actually trying to understand yourself. Right. I'll get to that. Before we go there, I wanted to tell you something, a bit of preamble, I would say. So please bear with me for some time, and then for at least the first day, and then listen to this preamble that I would lay before we come down to your questions, which is the more important thing. I will talk a little about our mind, right? So when you say mind, or thinking or thought or cognition, we have this thing called the chain of thought or train of thought. So we say that we have a chain of thought, but then I would like to ask you the question: is it a chain of thought, or are they chain thoughts? Now, what does that mean? Is it a thought chain or a chain thought, right? So, in order to explain that a little, thought chain or chain thought, right? I would like to ask you this, and reflect for yourself, right? You don't have to. It's a rhetorical question, but think for yourself. How does a god or an angel look like to you? Now, it can be any personal deity, God Almighty, angels, anything. Just for a moment, try to make a mental note, a mental image of how this god or angel look like. So if I ask you, you would say my God or my angel was like this, right? We know Zeus and we know the God. So it was like this. Oh, it was like this. Oh, it was like this. Oh, it was like this, right? So the last one is actually Optimus Prime. If you haven't watched, if you are not a kid anymore, if you haven't watched Transformers, you would know who Optimus Prime is. So Optimus Prime is a alien thing. It's not like God, but it's something almost God-like. It is this uh, truck-looking guy can transform into a uh, being. So that's Optimus Prime. So you would see that when I ask you the question, how does a god or an angel look like? Most of the time you would have a mental image of a human-like form, or you would have an animal-like form. If you are from a fancy culture like India, um, even China, you would see that they're so creative. Their goats look so nice. I mean, there's the very animal-like, and there are hybrid goats who are half human, uh, half animal-like. And even if you look at the Hellenic gods, there are some interesting gods. The everyone knows about the human-like gods, but the other gods are the really interesting ones. And this Transformer guys, they came up with a truck god. But when I asked you the question, you could have thought of anything. There are so many possibilities that you could think of, but you don't do that. You only think on a particular way. For example, if you grew in a more Greek or a Christianity related uh, environment, you would think of the god sort of on the first picture. But if you are from Egypt, I don't think anyone is, you would think of this god. And if you are from India, Lord Ganesha, you would think the god of god to be like this. So based on your upbringing, based on what you have heard, your thoughts are limited based on what you have heard and what you have uh, growing up into, what you have brought up in the culture. No one would come up with a image like this. No, what is this? What does this mean? It looks a little confusing, but no one would want to come up with this. So what I want to point out is that although we think that we could think of anything, we can't really think of anything. We are designed to think of certain things only, right? So that's why I asked the question: do we have a chain of thoughts or a thought train or uh, do we have free flowing chain of thoughts where we could think anything? Anything is possible, or is our thoughts are really actually chained, right? So, um, a second. Okay, so I will share this again. So, this is our God image, and even though you could have thought of many things, you did not think of that. You only thought of this. You only thought of the God that you are most familiar with. I would also show you this picture, uh, which is a picture. If you can identify, anyone knows, this is a picture of an image taken from the Hubble telescope, right? So it's fantastic. It's beautiful. Hubble telescope. So people who don't know what Hubble telescope is, it's a satellite telescope which takes images of the universe, right? And what I wanted to tell you with this is that now Hubble telescope has a few cameras. It has a uh, okay. Before going into that, I would have to tell you a bit of physics. So there's this naturally occurring phenomena called electromagnetic wave. An example for an electromagnetic wave is light. So light is not the only electromagnetic wave. Uh, there's so many in that spectrum. So it's a spectrum of things. So you have beta rays, X rays that you take when you have a fracture, gamma rays, and then you have infrared rays where you operate the remote with, and then infrared cameras that you have, and then you have the visible light range, which is visible to the naked eye of a human, and then you have ultraviolet. They say hummingbirds see the world in ultraviolet, and our cats and dogs see the world more towards the infrared. So they have a better vision at night, and we see the visible light range. And so from ultraviolet, there's so many other frequencies that you can tune to. I mean, you can't tune to, but they exist. So electromagnetic spectrum is like that. So the Hubble telescope has a few cameras. It not only captures the visible light, it also captures infrared, ultraviolet, etc., and even other radiation which we can't see. But when the Hubble captures these images, uh, let's say that he picked up something from the infrared range, uh, it's registered in his database, and he still wants to show us that he wants to include that in our image. But unfortunately, we can't see infrared. So what Hubble does it, the scientists have fed, okay, if you have get an infrared of 300 hertz per se, you should show us red. And if you get something of 500, you should show us blue. I mean, it's not the real thing, but it's something like that. So there's a database in Hubble saying, okay, if I got this infrared, I will show it to humans as red. If I got this, I will show it to as blue. So what we are seeing through this image is actually not the real universe that we can observe, but all that information Hubble has collected. And why I brought out that Hubble story is because isn't your mind uh, also acting like a Hubble telescope? It has recorded stories, and whenever you see something, you pick up that you pick what you see, and then you also pick what is available in your store, in your record, in your memory, or in your cognition, whatever you call it. You take it from there and you match it, and then you say, "This is what I see." I will further elaborate it. Uh, there's this guy called Plato, a great philosopher. He came up with this story called the Plato's allegory of cave. Bear with me and listen to me if you don't know what Plato's allegory of cave is. Plato came up with this thought experiment that you see that there's a cave, and there are some men who are chained towards the inside wall of the chain. You would, if your screen is clear, you could see them. They are not the guys who are holding these images. They are not the guys. They are on the opposite wall. They are chained. They could only see the wall of the cave, not the entrance. So they are covered from the entrance. They can't see the entrance, but they can only see the wall of the cave. And there are some people out there, bullies. They want to confuse these chained prisoners. So what they do is the light seeps in from the cave, the entrance of the cave, and when light comes through, they have these images, uh, and the shadow will be casted on the wall. So these prisoners now can see the shadow. So whenever a horse runs in front of the cave entrance, they would see the shadow of the horse. So what these prisoners thought was that the sound of a horse is really what we see in the shadow, right? So whoever who goes in front, if it's a duck or if it's a human or if it's a horse or a tree, whatever the shadow which is casted on the wall of the cave, they thought that this is the reality, right? But one day, one guy escaped this prison. He came out and then he went out and he saw a horse is an entirely different thing. What I have been seeing is not the horse. And then he went inside and then he tried to explain it to his fellow prisoners. Now these fellow prisoners also can't see each other; they only can hear. He was trying to explain it to his fellow prisoners, and he said, "A horse is not what we think; it's totally different." And the fellow prisoners thought he's lunatic, he's crazy. So that's the allegory of cave. But more importantly, what does this mean? When we see things, we think that we really see things. But are we really seeing things, or are we seeing an image of things or a shadow of things? Now, this shadow is based on what we have previously known. I will further elaborate this question. Look around in your room, and can you find something that you don't know? Can you find a single item in your room that you have no idea what it is, or something that you don't know. In some weird houses, you might find one or two items that you don't know, but usually you would see a door, you would see a table, you would see a computer, you would see a phone. Everything you see, you already know it. And if there's something totally new, I would say you still know it. If you see something totally unrecognizable, you still know it, that you know it's different to the things that I know. So you still know. We cannot see anything that we don't know. Have you start thinking of our mind in that sense? Can we think of anything that we don't know? We can only think of things we know. So are we actually really looking at things? Wait a second. Are we really actually looking at things? So uh, are we looking at things we know? Now that's the question, right? So are we really looking at when we say we see things, or we hear things, or we feel things? Are we look at really the things out there, or are we prisoners in our cave, like the Plato's allegory? And are we really interpreting things based on our database, and sort of seeing the shadows casted, or the shadows that we can capture, and then we call it reality? Now, which is we? I would like you to focus your mind on that. Are we really seeing things, or is it a shadow casted based on what I know? And the best example to understand is that you could never see something that you don't know, right? Um, if you see a different kind of a tree for the first time, you would know that it's a different kind, but you still know it's a tree. And as a kid, if you haven't seen, it's a thought experiment again. If you haven't seen a tree before, you still know that it's a upright thing. So you always see something based on what you know. So that's what I wanted to point out. Although we have a chain of thoughts, we actually have chain thoughts. We can only think, we can only see, we can only perceive things that we know. Right. Moving on uh, to another aspect of the way we think. So I'll be explaining actually the way my mind works, right? And you can relate to the way your mind works based on that. So when I put this image out, coffee, uh, often this is associated with a couple of friends having coffee. Even the heart shape is imprinted on the latte. So coffee is always associated with friends, loved ones, romantic. That is the idea that we get. And when you look at this, sports and beer, you watch a football match and there's beer, and then you have ice cream, break up ice cream. When you have, it's so mainstream, it's so pop culture, it's shown on movies. uh, Girls and boys, whenever they have a breakup, they eat ice cream. So it's very natural for us to also go out and eat an ice cream when we have a breakup or a heartache. Or tea. Now, tea is a culture in Sri Lanka. We are famous for Ceylon tea, and then we drink a lot of tea. And if you look, the tea was actually introduced by the British to Sri Lanka, the English. And if you look at the different flavors of tea, you see that there's Earl Grey, there's morning breakfast, where you obviously drink in the morning. So tea also is used in certain occasions, and each tea brand is used in certain occasions. So we are so designed uh, to sort of stereotyping our things, of the things that we use, things that we consume, things that we drink, uh, into situations, almost as if we are very habitual with that, right? So, like I was trying to show you earlier, that we can only think in a limited range. The way we act is also very limited, and we often associate things uh, with something that we have previously known or previously promoted. Now, before I became a monk, I also used to work in a multinational company, handling a multinational brand, I would say. And in marketing, it's all about reading how people's mind behave. So, it's quite interesting. I was doing that earlier. Now I am doing it from a different reason, for a different purpose. So in marketing, it's all about reading the mind of people. Marketeers know how limited the thought, how changed the thoughts are, and what they want to do is they want to direct your thinking in a particular way. So when you go to a sports bar and when you want to have a good time with your friends, there is a particular beer brand that you would pick. Or if you want to go out and have coffee with your friends, there is a particular brand of coffee that you would pick, and that's how they program you. So why they could program you is because every one of us works in this habitual pattern, right? So again, further elaborate it, you would see how we behave in different scenarios. So obviously, this looks like a party. It's a wedding, probably, and we act in a certain manner. Even if you are not directly related to a close friend of the bride or the groom, your mind is acting in a particular manner. Same goes on a funeral. Even if you are not a close person to the family, you sort of looks different to the way that your body language is body language is at during the wedding or the party. So each environmental situation, if you're at a shrine, if you're at a temple or a church, you're different. You're more uh, pious and you're more spiritual looking. It's quite opposite to being at a party or being at a funeral. So every occasion that we go, or every environment that we go, we tend to act differently. So at a funeral, you could say we are empathizing with the fellows, and they also say that we have this human have this ability to reflect the emotions of the people that we see in front of us. Classic thing is that when someone yawns, everyone starts yawning. So we have the ability to sort of mimic. So it's very similar to these situations that each situation that we go, we wear our own costume. I'm not saying externally, but internally. Our mind wears this costume, and we start acting like that. So when you go to Maldives, you're so free, it's very romantic and all that. But the question I want to ask you is that why can't you act as if you are in a beautiful sunny island of Maldives while you are at lockdown? So why can't you act super happy? I mean, you don't have to show it out to other people, but internally, why can't you be really excited and happy like you are at a party when you're at a funeral? Or can you be very depressed or sad at a party like when you're at a funeral? Can you swap these feelings? And if you can't, what stops you? Is the habit, or is it really like that? I want you to go out during the next week until I speak to you the next week. Go out and see. Can we now again be a little cautious on that? Don't act weird outside when you go out, right? Don't go to a wedding and try to dance off. That would be socially awkward. Don't do that. But I'm talking is internally, not externally. Externally, you could wear your black dress and go to a funeral, but internally, you're so excited. Again, this is of course if you're not a close relative or a keen of the family, right? But other things like can you be can you have the same feeling of being in a shrine when you're in Maldives? Or can you have the same feeling when you have in Maldives in a shrine? Again, let me reiterate again. Don't do it outside physically. I'm only talking about a thought experiment here, because it would be socially awkward. I mean, you can try out certain things, but then people would start saying that they listen to this Buddhist monk and now they look act weird. So I don't want people to say that to you, right? So now, having said that, are we really? What I wanted to point out is that are we really thinking freely? Do we have a free will of thought, or are we really just thinking in the limited information we have, and we are just creatures of habit? We only can think of a certain pattern, right? So I show you my face again, right? So creatures of pattern. Now they say that how memories are imprinted in our brain. This is just what the neuroscientists say, that we have neurocells in our brain, and whenever we try to think of an emotion, it would be the same neural pattern. So let's say that there's ABC neuron, sadness would be that pattern. And more we practice sadness, the neural link between those neurons or the cells, they become stronger. So if we practice joy, it will be stronger. Same thing for memories. If you keep thinking about your mom uh, or your dad or a flower, that neural link will be stronger. So it's almost as if that elephant walking on the same path every day, and day by day it becomes stronger. So although we think that we think freely, we act freely, it's evident that we tend to act in a very habitual manner. And I also want to understand. I also want you to understand our urges are also very habitual, right? The urges are not free will. They are not quite free. They are very habitual. And there's a particular way that these urges are formed. And if you are mindful enough, you could see how that habit came into place, right? How it came into place. So I would like to show you this. So I'm trying to formulate a theory here and sort of put you in a structure, so where you can take this knowledge out during this week, and then you can see if that's the case, and you can disagree with me also, and we'll talk about it at the later session, so in the Q&A. Right. So we are creatures of habit. I'm going to theorize it this way. We learn things, we register things, and then it becomes a habit. Uh, you know, psychologically speaking, this could be wrong, but it's just I'm putting my observation of myself and presenting it to you. It's just a model. Don't take it too serious. Uh, it could change, but see if this is the case for you. We learn things. We learn things through sensory experience. Like a kid, when a kid learns things, it always takes something, licks it, tastes it, put it in his mouth, uh, uh, smell it. That's how kids learn. And even we have our sensory experience from good, bad, nice, uh, fearful experience that we should be afraid of. We have experiences. And then we also learn in a more structured manner at school from the parents and society. You could say it's unstructured, but from parents and society. But when we go to schools and institutes, and then we also learn structured stuff. Like you are learning this model right now. It's more structured. It's a institutionalized model, and we also then uh, right next to learning this, learning is only one part of it. Experiencing is only one part of it. Right next to this experience, you also feel an emotion. You sort of register it. But sometimes just feeling an emotion or feeling an emotion is not enough for yourself to register it. Sometimes you need to rationalize, right? Some people they tend to go and rationalize it, but actually, our real method of learning is not rationalizing. I'll give you a fantastic example by uh, the glass of water, the glass in front of you. Have you ever questioned or have you ever tried to rationalize if it's a glass when you were young? You always grabbed it and believed it. You just felt the emotion and grabbed it. That's it. You don't try to rationalize it. But more we grow, more elder we become, and more information we are filled with, we try to rationalize it with the knowledge systems that we have, and we compare. Anyway, you still do it, and if you are convinced enough, you register it. And we also become convinced superficially. Sometimes you are it's rational, you feel it, you are convinced, but you're not fully convinced. And at one point, you start truly believing, right? And when you start truly believing it, it becomes an unconscious habit. Uh, so you act unconsciously. You don't think. And some scientists say that it's a mechanism for our ease. You don't have to think about the same routine thing every day. And in fact, they even say that when you are a kid, when before the age 5, you tend to experience so many new things. Everything is fresh. So even the time perception of time looks slower. I mean, the time flows slower when you're a kid, and when you grow old, the time goes fast. Why? Because everything you see is something that you already know, so that there's no new learning. You act just unconsciously. You act habitually. I could also tell you something to understand this. When you want to, when a friend invites you to a place that you haven't been before, he shares the Google pin with you, and you take a totally new route. Uh, on the way up going there, it feels longer. But when you're coming back on the same route, it feels shorter. Have you noticed that phenomenon? When you're going somewhere for the first time, it feels longer. But when you're coming back, returning back after that party on the same day, you feel that it's much shorter. So when we don't learn new things, we just act habitually. We automatically take that turn. We mindlessly keep on driving. So this is another thing that I want to show you of our mind. Oftentimes we do things mindlessly, and we are quite habitual in that sense. Right. So this is what happens in the long run. And let me disturb this for a minute. Anuruddha Thero, I sort of forgot to keep track of time. How are we doing on time?
Uh, Now it's 8:10 here. You can take another 20 minutes. That's fine.
Oh, okay, right. So I'll take 20 minutes then.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So in the long run, we do this. We have our sensory experiences, and then we learn through books and institutes, parents and society, and then we start, right next to that sensory experience, we start feeling that emotion. I'll share you another interesting story that a friend came to me, actually his wife, and she had this phobia of cockroaches. Not cockroaches, the flies, flies and cockroaches basically. So it's almost very OCD that it's sometimes even annoying to the people around her. And then I was talking to her, and then she was sharing her experience, and then she was telling the way it started. Uh, Before I became a monk, I had a son. I have a son. So I remember when he was young, when he was 6 months, and when he's on the mat, he would crawl out of the mat to the uh, floor, and then when there's an ant or a small spider or a caterpillar or a cockroach, whoever who comes, he would pick it up and then try to put it in his mouth. That's what kids do, right? They want to test their sensory experiences. So at that age, you are not particularly afraid or disgusted of a cockroach. Even a cockroach comes, you take it out and put it in your mouth. It's fine with you. But more you grow, you tend to hate it. You don't like the cockroaches. It's a disgusting thing. So for this lady, what has happened was her caretaker. She had a caretaker and her sister, who was only a couple of years elder. This caretaker was so afraid of cockroaches. Whenever she sees a cockroach, she reacts in a very uh, fearful manner, and that has registered in this young girl. And ever since, it has been very almost traumatic. She started developing this uh, extra fear for the cockroaches. So you see that sometimes when you feel the emotion uh, and deeply register it, it becomes it becomes a spontaneous habit, totally unconscious habit. But when I told her this is the way mind works, she actually started becoming aware of her current sensory experiences and how we react to the current environment. And then she started understanding her phobia to it, or the obsessive compulsiveness towards it. So this is in the long run. Now, what happens in the short run? This is what happens in the short run. In the short run. So in the short run, we see things, we taste, we hear, we see, smell, touch. So in general sense, if you look at psychology, you find five senses. But in Buddhism, you always talk about six senses. Now the sixth sense is not that sixth sense like in the sixth sense movie, the extra sense, but the sixth one is the mind actually. So you have your eyes, ears, uh, touch, smell, and touch, smell, and taste. Apart from that, you also have your mind, because you can also think of all things. Think of positive things, think of negative things, think of all memories, think of future. So all these are sensory perceptions in when it comes to Buddhism, or Hinduism for that matter. They talk about six senses. Uh, so usually what happens is that we see something, or we hear something, or we touch something, and right next to it we have an emotion. And now again, I want you to sort of think back. If you have seen that what you see and the emotion is not actually the same thing, right? Sometimes you see something and the emotion is followed by that, positive or negative. Uh, what happens is next, in the short run, you just act based on what you feel, right? So you come across a sensory perception, you have a feeling attached to it, it's almost next to it, and then you act based on it. So this is what happened in the short run. And I showed you in the long run, although we act this way, uh, there's a particular way it has happened. Now everything is looking in hindsight, reflecting back. And you can disagree with me on this one, and then we can discuss it later. But this is an observation. It's just a model that I'm putting to you, proposing to you. Isn't this the way it is happening? But what I really want you to do is to not accept what I'm saying, because I'm actually not saying you the truth. I'm not telling you the truth. Right? So I want you to explore your mind. Although you are listening to the experience of a monk, I want you to really look into your experience. Right? Why? Because no matter what I say, you will be still hearing what you want to hear. Right? Like these prisoners in Plato's cave, we are prisoners of our own mind. Right? So you cannot hear anything past what you know. But having said that, there's still a transformation in it, right? You would only understand based on the knowledge you have, but there will be also an understanding. It's not an understanding really; it's a transformation in you. By listening to me, you would be, first thing is that you could get brainwashed. You could listen to me and you can get brainwashed, and you can follow me for 10 years, and after 10 years you will realize that this monk has been lying all this time, right? Or you can recognize it in 2 weeks, and then you can say this is not the case, right? And then you can go back to your original pattern. But if you don't get brainwashed, I mean, getting brainwashed is also not bad at all the time. Like for example, the motivational speaker, he brainwashes you to a positive side, which is good, which is therapeutic, which is nice. Um, but I want you to go above and beyond of this mere brainwashing. I just want you to light up your own mind, like light the candle inside your own mind. So the prisoners are not in dark anymore, right? So in the short run, I will propose you another model for the short run. We have our, for some reason the word doesn't appear here. So we have our stimuli, right? We have the stimuli that we get from our sensory inputs, and then right next to our stimuli we have our emotion. And in psychology, in management, they talk about this brain map or mind map. You would see that our mind works in a path, like sort of chain of thoughts, and this chain of thoughts are right next to each other. So when we think about a chocolate, I also remember the first girlfriend who gave me a chocolate. Or when I see uh, when I see a particular color, I also remember my grandfather wearing that color, right? So when I have that mental image of my grandfather, there's also the warmth of my grandfather, that feeling. So you have a stimuli, and then you have an emotion also right next to it, and then you have the action based on what you feel. You act accordingly. Now, this doesn't have to happen in this format all the time. Sometimes you can get a stimuli, and based on that stimuli, you can get another stimuli, or you can get an emotion based on the stimuli, and then based on that emotion, you can get another emotion, and you can react to that emotion, and that reaction will be another stimuli. So it's all intertwined. It's not like a linear process which is happening. So you have your stimuli, you have your emotions, and then you have your action. And why am I telling myself, being a monk and all that? This is my long run and short run. Now see if it fits to you also. Right. So we were talking about the urge in the beginning, and then without talking about urge, without directly approaching urge, I was telling you a few things. That mind is limited by the knowledge and belief we have, and we are creatures of habit, and that we feel, we talk, or act based on the stimuli, right? So in the long run, there's a particular way of we start believing, getting convinced, and start believing in things until it becomes a habit. And in the short run, based on this habit, we have a stimuli, and then we using that habit that we have developed, we respond to that stimuli, and there's always an emotion attached to it, right? So we'll move on to the other side of it. Uh, Different facets of this urge. Now, what does that mean? Um, right. Before going there, um, I also wanted to ask something from one of the participants here. Uh, Now we have 20 minutes, which is okay. We have about 10 more minutes. I could keep going on this thing. It actually, when I started to share my mind, it took more time for me than I expected. I don't think we can cover the entire urge part today. So, would you like
Sir, you can go.
me to?
You can take time.
Right.
I think.
I can take time also. Right. So, I would also like to keep it short to about 90 minutes. So, I will take only 20 more minutes. But I wanted to ask you, would you like to go for the therapeutic practice that I would have to suggest today itself? Or would you like to continue this story more and then listen to that on a later day? If one of the participants can tell me what is best for you. I also have a therapeutic practice that you can do with related to your body and breathing. We can also look into that, take maybe 10 minutes for that, or we can put that, postpone it, and then we can discuss on the urges and desires today. What should we do? Could anyone volunteer to say what's best? We'll do the therapeutic part. Okay, right. So that's quite democratic. So let's do the therapeutic part. So before I go to the therapeutic part, I will also tell you this part that um, okay. So we were talking about the ways our mind work, and we want to discuss about different facets of our desire, right? What does the facets mean? Um, Different facets of our desire, right? What I wanted to show you here is that probably you have seen this thing. This is a pyramid introduced by this guy called Maslow. So it's the basic motivational theory of people, right? Why people do what they do, and at each point of their life, they have different desires. These are different urges, right? So they say that when you're quite young, your needs are quite physiological, like it's getting your milk, getting your food, and the basic stuff. And then there comes a point in life, early kid, a kid when he grows, apart from just feeding on your mother's milk, on your mother's teeth, you need safety also. You need to have that feeling of safety. And further you go when you become a teenager, or even a early child, apart from being safe, we also need to have this sense of belongingness or love, right? Especially when you are a teenager. And then after that point, it's not all about being loved or having your sort of physiological or materialistic needs or being safe. You also need power in your life, right? And they say that after that, or after that stage, some people would even go to this thing called self-actualization. So that's Maslow's view of urge or desire, or why people uh, do what they do and what's the in the base of it. If you look into the ancient yogic practice, they have a better explanation of it. So how they depict this is that they attach uh, these things called chakra into the into a person's body. So, for example, the root chakra is in the bottom of your it's in the it's towards the pelvic area, and the chiral chakra is towards your navel point, slightly below that. So, likewise, they say that people have different chakra, and we can manipulate that chakra, and each chakra represents a color, each chakra represents this and that. But I actually want to look at it in this way. Each this chakra represents a pattern of your mind, and it's almost very similar to what Maslow has proposed, but it's much better. For example, the root chakra. So, what I want to harp on is that it's not really about a physical thing that I'm talking about here. It's about how your mind works, right? So, the root chakra is responsible for your physiological needs again. Uh, the desires, the basic desires, money, career, your greed, greed for food, etc., etc. And then the second chakra is more for your uh, sexuality and pleasure. It's a little different to that. And the third chakra is more for your power, your personal power, your social strata. So the first three chakras, they say that they are very how to say, very materialistic, first three chakras. And from there onwards, there are four chakras which are of self-actualization. Now, Maslow has only put a small pyramid up there, but in Hinduism or in yoga, they attach a lot of value to that part. So, starting from the heart chakra, in general terms, they say it's love, but it's actually not love. It's compassion. It's love for the others or self-acceptance. So it's a much broader concept than just being in a romantic relationship. So it expands much further. And then there's self-expression. You start uh, believing yourself more, or you start expressing yourself more the way you feel. You start becoming more open, right? So that's the third, and that's the next one. And then there's third eye for wisdom, and the last one, which is sort of equated to enlightenment. So there's three basic chakras and four other chakras. Again, what I wanted to point out is that we have desires, but these desires change time to time and based on the point of life that we are at. So the point of life we are at is not always a chronological age. It's not. It doesn't have to be a chronological age. For some people, for example, the place I was before in the cave area, people there would not have their basic needs. So what they would do is that they have a daily fight for their food and for their materialistic needs. So they don't have much time to think of something like self-actualization, or they don't even think about their social status, because their basic needs are to the basic ambition of life is to find that daily portion of rice, right? So they don't think too much about how posh we should look, what type of things we should dress, or they don't tend to think of those type of things. So based on the point of life you are at, uh, you tend to think differently. And when I say based on the point of life, it's not always a chronological thing, but it's a different thing. So each stage has different motivation, and each motivation is giving you an urge. For example, if your motivation is to find love, that would be your urge. And if you are deprived of that, then that would make you uncomfortable, right? So like now, at the beginning of the COVID lockdown, some people are saying me that one of the big issues they had was that I'm married, just my wife or the husband, but my loved one is not really here. My lover is out there, and I can't meet him or meet her, and that's the biggest issue I have. So his urge or his desire was romance, and that urge cannot be fulfilled because of this lockdown. Right. Um, I will share one last thing. Oh no. Okay. So then I will call it a day with regard to urges and compulsions and desires and all that, and I will continue this on the next day. And if we can't squeeze everything in for 4 days, maybe we'll take a extra day to discuss these things. But then I will go to the more therapeutic part before we conclude this. So this is what I want to share with you. Right. I want you to do a small exercise. Uh, this is basically to get rid of your negativity, but in a more positive manner, right? Usually, usually when we try to get rid of our negativity or when we express our negativity, we express in a very negative manner. We express our negativity in a negative manner. But I want you to express your negativity or cast away your, throw away your negativity in a positive manner. So get rid of your negativity in a positive manner. And in order to tell how it works, that you might have noticed you can place your palm facing upwards or downwards. So this motion is called supinated, and this is called pronated. So there's supinated and pronated. Supi, pro. And if you look at the word pronated, right? Pronated, it has this thing that you're prone to something. It's like you're vulnerable, you're downward, so you're prone to things, right? And supi in German it means super. That's what I learned from being in Germany. Supi means being positive or super. So supi, prone, right? And you might have noticed that when you breathe in and breathe out, inhale and exhale. In the morning, the first thing I did today in the morning, 2 hours ago, I yawned and stretched, and I did it in this position, like facing upward. But when you want to exhale, you sort of clench your body. You shrug your shoulders and you clench your body, almost in a pronated position. You can say that even when you try to express, right? Even when you try to express, uh, if someone asks, "How's your day today?" you would say, uh, uh, "It's bad," right? If it's very frustrating, uh, you would exhale, and you'll be in the pronated hand gesture. But if you're in a good mood, if someone asks, "How are you doing?" or if you're excited, so you inhale, ah, inhale, but it's the same sound, almost the same sound, but it's the inhale and you're supinated. Ah, ah, ha, ha. So there's a difference in that. So the therapeutic practice what I'm proposing to you today is really this. Um, Give me a second. Right. So this is what I'm proposing to you. What you can do is you are going to uh, you're, you're going to take a deep breath. I'll first tell you the steps. You're going to take a deep breath. And when you're taking this deep breath, uh, face your palms upward, being this supinated position, right? So you take a deep inhalation, and then next what you do is you don't try to exhale that out. You forget about exhalation. Don't focus on exhalation at all. But you open your mouth slightly and then try to say ah. Right now, this word ah or the sound ah is so important. I started learning Sanskrit recently. In Sanskrit, in Sinhala, in English, in any most of the languages, you find a to be the first vowel. So it's so important. It's like the first thing that we say. Ouch! Like ah. It's a very basic human sound that we have. So you would also notice that when you say ah in a particular manner, you would feel the vibration on the base of your throat, on the base of your vocal cord. If you can take your finger there and uh, sound an ah, you will feel the vibration of ah in your base of your throat or the base of the vocal cord, right? So what I want you to do is uh, deep inhale deeply, and then keep saying uh, in any tone, in any semi note or whatever the musical note you want to say, but say a basic A, and then don't touch that vocal cord, but try to feel it. Try to feel or focus on the vibration of your throat. And then what you will do is when you keep doing that, you can also you will feel that when you keep exhaling your air out, that you will have to force air out from your diaphragm. You will also see that you will have to sort of squeeze your stomach and exhale out to keep that R going. And there will be a point where you are totally run out of air, and your R will stop, and then you take a deep inhale again. So that's our therapeutic practice today. I will take this forward on the next day, and I will connect it to another physical sort of stretching exercise and how this affects our mind. And mind you, uh, if you do this in the morning or in the evening in a non-disturbing environment without thinking about anything, just leave everything you have away. You don't need to think of anything, you don't need to reflect of anything. All you have to do is just say ah. And ah being a very natural sound, there's absolutely nothing magically about it. You just say ah. So what you do is you take a deep inhale, you take a deep breath in, then you go and when you do that, you are in this supinated position. You are not in a pronated position, you are in a supinated position. You do this for 1 week, and let's discuss the result later. The idea of this is that you say the ah, which is a in a very positive way, right? So you let out your frustration in a positive way. So although I say that, you don't think about it, you don't try to relate it anywhere, you just simply do this exercise, that's it. And don't do it for more than 3 minutes, only for 3 minutes. You might need a few hours, but if you properly do it, right, according to uh, all the yogic knowledge, if you do it for 3 minutes, you will do it for 27 times. That's if you can hold your breath for that long and if your lung capacity is good. So, uh, supinated position, deep inhalation, early in the morning or before you go to bed, non-disturbing environment. Don't think about anything. Just do the ah. And try to feel the vibration in the base of your neck, base of your throat, base of your vocal cord. You don't touch it, but you just try to feel it. And then once you feel it, feel how you exhales out your air from your diaphragm, from your stomach. And you keep on going, ah, right? And then we'll take it forward on the next time, and then we'll develop it a little further. So this is a very therapeutic exercise. Why? Because first thing, being being the most natural sound anyone can utter. Ah, it's a very natural sound. It's not artificial at all. And being supinated is always linked to being positive, being super, right? Versus the pronated. You're not restricted, you're not downward, you're not prone to anything, you're not vulnerable to anything. You're just super, you're doing good. But still, you have your internal lockdown pressures, stressors, urges, whatever. You let them all out. You let all them out. Let your frustration out through the R, but positive, right? So let's do that exercise for the next week. Start it, and doing it early in the morning when you wake up, I think is quite nice. And even if you get a distraction from someone, just ignore it because it's only for 3 minutes, and then keep your hour for 3 minutes. You can time your Fitbit or the alarm clock, and for 3 minutes do that. So that brings us to the end of our first day. So what we discussed today was basically uh, our urges, right? We discussed our urges, and before discussing our urges, we actually went into see how our mind works, right? So then we discovered, although our mind is something that we think that we have all the possible creativity, or we could think of all the possible things. we figured that we can't think of all the possible things, that we can only think of certain things that we know about, that we are aware of, or that we have information. Apart from having that information, apart from knowing, we also discovered that it's not only about knowing; it's also very habitual, right? Mind works in a very habitual manner. Then we also found out that these habits doesn't come automatically. There's a particular way it happens in the long run. We have a sensory learning, or we have a learning from our schools or from institutes or our parents or peers, and then we start registering. We don't register everything that we learn also, right? We only register things which are things that we really feel. We feel we have a deep connection to, or we rationalize. And then there's a level of superficial convincing also. But the real believer, he starts believing in it, and then after that, he doesn't question it. It's simply an unconscious process. It's an unconscious act, right? So when that happened in the long run, in the short run, we also saw that we have stimuli, and then right next to that, almost right next to that stimuli, there are emotions. And emotion can be a stimuli also, because why? It's not only five senses, we have the sixth sense also. So the sixth sense generate images of our previous memories, previous tastes, etc., etc. And then it also generates our previous emotion, how we felt. And based on how we felt, if you would notice that you could have another emotion right next to it. So what happens in the short run is that you have your stimuli, you have your emotion, and then there's a reaction. Classic example: you go to a funeral, you see the funeral, you remember how you felt when your parents passed away, and then you react in a very sad manner. That's just a very gross example. So what I want you to do is observe all these things that I mentioned. If you agree with me, that if you could see them in your mind, this is the monk's mind that we are talking about, my mind, but see if you could notice this in your mind. So with that, we'll conclude the first day, and we'll start again from this point. Instead of discussing here to next session, we'll discuss more about desires and compulsion. So I would briefly open this for a small Q&A for a couple of minutes, but if you have something related pertaining to this, we can discuss. It's open for you. If you don't agree with me, or if you think that it's not this way, it's a different path, you can discuss it. I'm sure that everyone is practicing R right now. So because yeah, I'll leave you to practice your R. Maybe you can, since it's early morning here now. It's 7 a.m. here, and it's 8 p.m. for you. So today, before you go to sleep, uh, you had all this frustration. Apart from this lockdown stuff, this monk came and he started giving you his version of all the lockdown related issues, right? So let out all these frustrations, positive, in your supinated position. Inhale deeply, and then let out this frustration positively. Let's together try to get rid of this negativity, but positively. We don't have to read this negativity negatively anymore. Let's let out these frustrations positively. Okay. So with that, I think we could conclude. And I actually did this lecture instead of doing a conversation or a chat with you, because I want to cover some ground which related to mind and Buddhism, because there could be some people who are not familiar with the Buddhist way of life or the Indian Sri Lankan way of life. So please bear with me the next week also. I will cover some ground first, and then we'll get into a discussion. Okay. So with that, uh, I wish you good sleep today, because it's sleeping time for you. So have a restful, a good rest, have a deep sleep, and let out your frustration. And I would also wish you uh, Sabbe Satta Bhavantu Sukhitatta, that may everyone find their existential bliss. With that, I will conclude for today. Back to you, Anuruddha Thero.